Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome. Thank you for joining Walker Zanger and Convo by Design. I'm just going to let a few more folks into our waiting room, and then Josh will take it over.
It's funny, I always love the first few minutes where I get to actually look at everybody. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, it's great to see everybody.
It really is. I love seeing your smiling faces, or even if you're masked up. There you are. Even if you're masked up, I know that you're smiling underneath. I love it.
All right, Josh, I think we have what we would call a Zoom quorum. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Walker Zanger and Convo by Design in the showroom. We appreciate that you joined us today, and please subscribe to Convo by Design wherever you subscribe to your podcasts. And with that, Josh, take it away.
Thank you, Erica. First thing I would like to do is welcome all of you. Susan, welcome to the showroom. The showroom is a recorded live interview series with amazing creatives. It's presented in partnership with Walker Zanger. So Erica, thank you, Walker Zanger. As Erica mentioned, if you like this conversation, and I really hope you do, I'm super excited about it. We will be publishing it as a podcast episode in both audio and video, so you can go back and watch it again. So thank you. And as Erica mentioned, you can subscribe to Convo by Design everywhere you find your favorite podcasts, so you don't miss a single episode like this one with Susan. And that being said, Susan, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Good. What did you say before that it was a choice?
Oh yeah, being offended sometimes is a choice.
Yeah, and it's funny because one of the things that I've noticed is as we do more and more of these conversations, we find ourselves in little boxes where we really try to work on our lighting, and we try to, like I'm looking at myself today and I'm like, wow, I'm a little orange today, but you know what? It's all right. It's all good. And I found that a lot of things are a choice. And one of the things that I've discovered through this process of talking to creatives like you is that you not only make the choices for yourself, but you define how other people are able to live and how those choices affect their lives through the work that you do. And I always like to start with the origin story. I love the origin story. And in your case, I want to hear how you started and why. I want to hear why you leave a firm and go to start your own eponymous firm. What was behind it, and sort of how you feel about that. And for someone like you, even as accomplished as you are, is that something that was scary for you? So I guess with that, I'd love to know the origin story.
Well, whenever you start anything that's all on your own, I think that it is very scary. Honestly, when you have your own business, it's scary every day. It's all in how you handle those fears. I think that it was for me to make that big decision to go out on my own has a lot to do with my own personal evolution as a person, as a designer, my point of view, getting to know myself a little better. Sometimes you say to yourself, well, I've reached this, I've accomplished this, I've reached my goals, what's next? And I am fortunate that I've had I've had great support and a wonderful career. But I also think it's important that I keep growing and I keep changing and hopefully bringing new things to the table. I think that, when you bring everybody with you, so you might have left them in some way, but you still have them in other ways.
Your design, so it's so funny. I tell this story. When I first started doing the podcast, this is not my first career. My first career was in broadcast, but I've always loved architecture and design. And I would be doing that today had I had a modicum of the skill and talent that you have, but I don't, so I can talk about it. And one of the things that I find so amazing is that creatives like you sort of find your style. And when I started the podcast, I would ask this question that today is, even when I listen back to old episodes, it's kind of cringy for me. It's not a stupid question, it's just pedestrian. I would ask, so what's your style? What's your favorite style of design? And I realized that the incredibly talented designers, real creatives, don't necessarily have to do a particular style, but they always have a fingerprint, certain through lines, certain things that are always evident in their work that they can build upon which to create any number of different directions to go. And for you, I wanted to start with sort of the origin for certain through lines that I see in your work.
Okay.
It's drama, it's emotion, right? It's feeling. It's like you're creating a set, you're creating a story. And I'm curious if you've always designed that way, if it was something that you sort of you learned along the way, or if it was there when you started.
I think it's who I am as a person. And I think that if I didn't start off that way, it's because someone was stopping me from expressing myself in that way. So I think I'm really fortunate that I have been given the opportunity to really fully express myself and, bring that feeling forward, and be empathetic with the person that's sitting in front of me that wants a space created for them. So I think that a lot of what, I'm not a designer that memorizes the provenance of a piece of furniture. I'm always somebody that looks at a piece of furniture and says that feels good, or that feels right, or I like the line of it, or the mood of it. And I think when you look at everything like that, when it's all added together, I think that you're left with a space that exudes a feeling. I feel as if I'm much more agile as a designer if I don't have rules that I have to follow. And I also think that anybody that comes to me and wants to work with my firm, I think that they want to know that what they're being left with looks like them. So the only thread through the work that I do that I recognize is the atmosphere that's created, or a sense of atmosphere that's created.
You know what's interesting to me is I often hear people talk about certain comparisons between interior design and fashion. And it's really interesting to me to hear you talk about interior design as a reflection of them, where when you look at fashion is often dictated because they want to be somebody else, or they want to look like somebody else. So it's really interesting. You can make your fashion choices with an inspiration board based on a model or based on a person that you see, whereas design really is so personal. And that being said, and because you're trying to find who someone really wants to be, psychology comes into this, and you're talking about things that are kind of challenging at times to drill down on, because when you first sit down with a couple, he's going to say this, she is going to say that, or he's going to say this, he's going to say that. It takes time, right, to get to the bottom of that. Where do you start? Do you have a process?
Well, my process always starts with talking to them. And sometimes if you have a couple that they seem to be really different, but they've got to share something or they wouldn't be together. And it's my job to figure out, you hope it's a good thing, you hope it's a kind and healthy thing, but you have to really listen to what they say so you can figure out what that thing is, what their priorities are, what is important to them. None of us know what we share with our partners. No one really knows what that relationship is all about. So in a way, I have to kind of be a voyeur and a private detective and try to figure out what it is that they share that's really successful, because they both have to love it. Listening is a really big part of what I do. And when I'm done, the interior should really be a self-portrait of the people I'm doing it for.
Which leads me to one of the other things I find so interesting about your work. Just out of curiosity, your thoughts on, if I say, it's like free association, right? If I say the word maximalism, what's your response to that?
You know, I think that if you can do it successfully, I think it's great. You know, I think there's a difference between just getting a whole bunch of stuff and putting it together, or getting a whole bunch of items together that have a relationship.
Totally agree. And the next place I wanted to go is I wanted to actually touch on the edit. But before I did, I'm curious, would you consider yourself a designer who practices maximalism at times? Not that you do it all the time, but is that an area that you would consider yourself a practitioner?
I've never thought about it in those terms, but I will tell you that I will fill a space. And I'm filling that space because I'm paying attention to every part of that space. I think it's important to look up, it's important to look down. And I think that when you're working with an architect, it's a hand and glove relationship. They've provided you with the substrate, and it's your job to clothe it, you know, in something that fits it perfectly. Nobody likes a loose glove or a glove that's too tight.
It's so true.
So if that's maximalism, then okay.
No, I asked the question because, you know, some people will embrace certain tags. Like, yeah, I practice that. It's something that I do. Some people want to be free of any type of encumbrance, any type of label, because you know, some don't want to pigeonhole themselves. I think, you know, listen, if the more labels you can attach to yourself as it's a philosophy, you know, it sort of builds on the tapestry. And I ask about that because I wanted to touch on the edit. I wanted to know, because when you do fill a space, the way that you do in your design, and one of the things I love, I love doing the showroom the way that we do it here, because in years of doing the podcast, I mean, listen, before March 13th of 2020, the number of recorded virtual interviews that I did, or even video interviews, you know, like this, you could count on one hand after 6 years, 7 years. Since March 13th, I've done one live interview. Since then, the rest I've been able to have opportunities like this where we get to talk about your philosophy, and then we get to go look at pictures, and we get to see how it all comes to life. And that's fun for me, although I cannot wait to get back to live. I will just say that. But that being said, I wanted to talk to you about the edit. So the edit is so important, and I'm curious, sort of your thoughts on the edit, where you start. Do you start from the very beginning, or do you generally try to get to a space where you're closer to the end and then start pulling?
I don't pull at the end.
You don't?
No, I don't. I really don't. I think that what I do is I layer. And I always go back to the first layer before I add another layer on it. So I think my process is very additive. And I don't make a single decision at the end of the project that I don't revisit every single decision that surrounds that decision on the way to that decision. So it requires some time and some thoughtfulness. I don't think good design happens in a vacuum. And these things are going to live together, hopefully forever. And I'm definitely somebody that keeps adding on to that onion. And the natural stopping point usually I hate to say it, usually has to do when people are tired. They want it to be done. You know, the final layers in any interior are the people that move in and what they bring with them at that moment. You know, so you have to make sure that you create something that there has to be space for them in it as well.
I'm so glad you bring this up, because this is one of the things that I think gets glossed over and overlooked so often, is that, you know, designers, you're not the only one doing the work.
Right.
The clients are doing a ton of work. You know, it's emotional, it's time consuming, it's expensive, it's exhausting. And, you know, to put yourself in their headspace, they're excited about this project, and they're excited. I would imagine that you could confirm that people are usually less excited about it towards the end as they are towards the beginning. They get a little, it's just exhausting, right?
Well, nobody enjoys the 9th month of pregnancy. You know,
I'll take your word on that.
No, I mean, you'll have, and I take my word from other people, but I will say that you are just about done by the time you install a house. The client is worn out. Their pocketbook and their emotions.
Yeah, and from the emotions standpoint, I think what's interesting about that is there's a certain level of exhaustion that you can attach directly to the decision-making process. Mm-hmm. where people get really tired of actually making the choices. Take the money out of it. It's just, I'm tired of making choices. I'm tired of making color choices. And that's why I find it so fascinating, your process of layering, because, you know, when I in advance of this, as I was thinking about us having this conversation, I was thinking, you know, there's really only 2 ways to do this. There is, you fill a room and then you go back at the end and you edit it out, and nothing that was there would have been there anyway if you didn't envision it as part of your design. Or the other way is to just sort of add as you go and fill. And I think that your process of fill is more like you mentioned, this additive process where it's like, oh, I can add a touch there. I think it was, I butcher quotes all the time, but it was Picasso, I believe, who said something to the effect of, he's done 20,000 paintings and never finished a single one, just because he never felt like his work was completed. And I'm curious, if it sounds to me like you don't feel that way, because you do layer along the process. And I'm curious how, you know, this is going to be such a difficult question for you to answer, but how do you know when you're done?
I think I know when I'm done because it strikes a balance in my mind's eye. You know, the first virtual reality that ever existed should be in your head. And when you do these interiors, you know, I layer these pieces in these rooms, and I'm looking for something that resonates with my eye. It's almost really good math. You have to recognize when the balance is struck in the color, in the texture, in the lines, and in the forms. You really have to you have to pay attention and be mindful as you're doing your interiors. I'm not absent from any rooms that we work on. I am thinking about them. There's a reason for pretty much every move. I could go so far as to say, if I removed one thing, then I might, oh my gosh, things have fallen apart. I have to put that one thing back. But those are my own issues.
It's a real issue, and which leads me to sort of the next idea in that is, I wanted your thoughts on accessories. And it sounds like such an easy thing, right? The smalls. It sounds like smalls are such a, you know, I've done a lot of work in the past with the Set Decorators Society of America. Mm-hmm. I love set decorators. I think Tony Duquette was a set decorator. I know a number of designers were set decorators before they became designers. Set decorators and designers are not the same thing. And when designing a set, you know, there is no client. It's just a page, right? So you can look at a story, and then it really falls on the designer, the set decorator, to decide what should be there and what isn't. But what's fascinating is that they're designing a story. And I don't see that in every designer I speak with, but I definitely see that with you, like, because your work is there is so much emotion there is drama. I'm curious if you feel as though you're telling a story when you're working with your clients, and because of that, the smalls have to represent almost one of the most challenging parts of that, because finding a big piece takes far less time than finding a lot of small pieces that are perfect for the space.
Well, I feel like I am telling their story. So I'm communicating their story, which actually inspires me and keeps all the work usually very fresh, because that's not my responsibility. They come to me with a story and it's my responsibility to illustrate it. I do like large gestures when it comes to accessorizing, because I think that you have to look at every space graphically. It's a three-dimensional thing, but I also sometimes take each elevation and look at it in the second dimension, as a flat thing. So you have to kind of go back and forth between those two worlds. So accessorizing, I'd rather do one larger gesture than do a lot of tiny little gestures. Because it's too much conversation that doesn't have a lot of meaning.
Sorry, Josh.
It's the difference.
I am going to interrupt, because what you're saying, Susan, is also true in the world of tile. It's like you can find that beautiful pattern or display that you love and use it in a grand gesture, as you've mentioned, and save the white or the other pieces of marble for something else. But you can take that big, beautiful, bold tile that you love and use it in that grand gesture and move forward with the rest of your design. I just think, it's just there's so much more about it than just the world of accessories. Sorry to interrupt.
To your point, if you were going to hear some of the things that I've designed, I think that I would rather hear a long, low gong sound than a bunch of tinkling bells. That might be a reach.
No, you know what? You know what's interesting? Gosh, I love this. I really do. Very rarely, and I think the audience might be able to sort of feel this as well, but very rarely do we talk about design in terms of what it feels like, what it sounds like, what it smells like, what it sounds, I just thinking about all those things. And that's one of the things, that being an editor as well, I love magazines. I love the books. I love the tactile feeling. I love going page to page. The problem that I have, it's not a problem, it's just, it is what it is you can't smell it. You can't hear it. You can't really put yourself in it and feel what the rug feels like. And as a designer, you kind of have to think through it, because your clients don't get to feel it or see it or smell it until you provide it.
You want it to be a really sensory experience. And I will even joke sometimes when I'm working with people and we'll pick out a color, and I know that I really like that color because it looks like it would taste good. Do you know what I mean? It's, oh, that's tangy or that's warm. But I do think that I do think that other senses come into play, and I wonder what the sound is when I look at some rooms, and what sound are you emitting?
And I think I bring that up and I lean in a little bit on that, because I really do think it's so important, and I think it's not considered oftentimes. And I can give you an example that I think illustrates it, that everyone can relate to. Everyone's heard the story that when you're selling a house, before the open house, bake some cookies, right? Dry a load of clothes. Everyone's heard that. And it's true, because they've done studies on this. This is something that scientifically there's evidence to support, that these types of things do help people feel like that is more their home now, because that's something that they can relate to. And I think, I've often wondered if the same principle could apply to design.
Well, it's a living thing. It's and when people are in the space, it evolves and changes with them. And so you have to remember that what you're creating is something that has a respiration. It's got to expand when it needs to expand. It's got to hold you when it contracts. I do think it's a living thing. And I really think that if you are doing a space and you're not imagining people in it, then you're probably, you need to think about it. You need to think about putting people in it. I don't want to say anything, but it is for human beings. You know,
Yeah. And I want to jump into the imagery in just one second, but before I do, I had one other question for you that is of interest to me, and I imagine it's of interest to everyone else too. Specifically, as it relates to your design, it's about people. Since March of 2020, our lives have dramatically changed. We have all changed the way that we live. Our clients have all changed the way that they live. Your design has to accommodate for those types of changes. I'm curious how things like tech in particular, cable and wiring, the things that designers just hate to have to think about, but you do now even more so than you ever did before. I'm just curious how the last 10 months have changed the way that you work and changed the way that you design and changed, if at all, your process.
Well, technology has been with us for a long time in the home, and you always work around it. And yes, I do kind of, it is not the fun part for me. But in my own home, the only thing that I can say is I've had to rearrange things ever so slightly in order to have a place to sit and work. Because when I did my home for myself initially, I did not design that. I thought I would always be going to an office. So I've had to adapt my own space. And I do hate wires. I cannot stand them. So for me, I have to think about a way to conceal them. You know, accessory items can be good for that.
I would imagine.
Yeah. So I also have to think about now when I start new projects, I think that we might be living like this for a little while, or at least we now, you know, once you know something, then you have to pay attention to it, and you have to program for it in your interiors. So now when I work with clients in spaces, I have to think, where are they going to be if they need to work from home? Are there two separate office working areas for a couple that both have careers? You know, where is the homework station going to be? You know, since March, most of my maintenance calls from my clients are recovering chairs that their kids sit in to work on their homework. And I hope that I have backed computer stations into the wall so you don't see the wires. And I'm thinking about that. I don't want to look at that. Nobody does. But yeah, I think it's changing the way all of us think about technology. I'm embracing technology. When I get on, I actually love Zoom. I know there's a lot of people that complain about it and they think that I'm tired of another Zoom call. But if it weren't for Zoom, if I hadn't embraced it, I wouldn't be able to continue doing the thing that I love in a really good way. So I feel like technology has saved us. I mean, the internet has opened up. I love to travel and I haven't been able to get on a plane or leave the country. But I can visit places. I can visit places online, and I can do research on cultures so that I'm still living an enriched life. So I do think that technology, I think technology has been a gift for artists and people that require, delving inside themselves, for ideas.
Yeah,
and
no, totally. Yeah, and inspiration. I totally agree with you. And it's fascinating too, because, none of us got to go to KBIS. None of us went to Modernism Week. None of us went to West Edge Design Fair, or, I mean, you name the event, none of us went to it. Salone,
we thought we were going.
We thought we were going.
And then the week before we canceled.
Yes, we did.
Groundhog Day is next week.
Boy, isn't that the truth? Groundhog Day has been every day since, but I digress. With that, I think, the perfect place to start is, Erika, if we could go into some imagery, and we're going to start with this Austin restaurant. And folks, here's what we're going to do now. We're going to do a deep dive into, or as deep as we can, into some of Susan's projects. And what I'd really love to have here, I'd love for this to be interactive, so you know that y'all are a part of this too. Down at the bottom, there's the chat feature. If you have any questions about this, please don't hesitate to type those in. And Erika is going to moderate that. And when the time comes and it's appropriate, she'll sort of break in and we can get all those questions answered. So if there's something you want to know about technique, if you want to know where Susan sourced it, if you want to know about where it came from, or anything else, please do ask. So Susan, what are we looking at? Where is this?
This is a restaurant that we did in Austin, Texas. And it started off, I think it was inspired for the client, it was inspired by his tremendous wine collection.
Okay.
So he really wanted to have a restaurant that reminded him of the south of France.
And a couple of things that I'm noticing. Well, first of all, before I even comment on that, where did you come in? Did you come in at the very beginning?
Yes.
Okay, you came in at the beginning. Were you working with the architect at the time, or was the restaurateur the client?
Yes.
The architect was.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I came in from the beginning with the architect.
Okay. And so the client, by the way, did you pick the art as well? Did you do, is it
I worked
wall-to-wall?
with the artist.
Ah.
I worked with the artist, Michael Dines.
Amazing.
And I had to talk to him about using purple. He'd never used purple before. And I said, we've got to come up with something.
And why is that? That's what the owner wanted.
Well, we wanted it to remind people of France.
Okay.
So they have the lavender, and lavender is lavender.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, it's funny. I will ask stupid questions all day long to get where I need to go. But, purple, I get the wine connection, but, oh, that's so nice. How many bottles did you have to accommodate for, or what was the plan?
I thought you were going to ask me how many bottles I had to drink. And so I got a little nervous. No, thousands of bottles of wine. It was a growing collection. So once you filled the walls, we had to think that we've got a double. And there was a little wine room, a double height wine room, I believe, that was attached to one of the dining rooms. I can't give you a number.
No, that's fine. It's not that. Here's why I asked the question, because it feels to me, it doesn't feel crowded. It feels like you took the wine and you turned it into art. It feels like functional art to me.
It is functional art or wallpaper.
Okay.
I mean, it became an architectural feature.
Yeah.
And so it became a pattern or a texture that went away.
And changed.
We have a guest who would like to know how you chose Citron for the color of the upholstery.
Okay, so I'm on a train in the south of France, and it's the spring, and we're passing by these fields that are just coming alive, and this color was blanketing for as far as the eye could see when I was looking outside the train window. So yeah, I love this color. I feel like this color is really percolates wooden tones and things like that. So I always think that this color reflects a lot of light.
And then the next question is, are each of the cases thermally controlled?
I think so. I'm not sure about the wall, but I think that was the intention. That was the intention.
It's a great question.
Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
How do you feel about mixing metals finishes throughout a home? Do you go by any rules or guidelines?
I'd like to mix metals and metallic finishes, but you have to do it really thoughtfully and in a really balanced fashion. But I love silver and gold together, bronzes and silvers and golds, but you have to be consistent and measured in where you place it.
Oh.
It's not haphazard. You've got to put, it's easy just to use all one color. You have to really think about it if you're going to use more than one.
The other thing that I noticed that you did here, just it feels it feels magical because you can see it, but you can also completely forget that it's there. I'm trying to count the sources of lighting that you incorporated into this space. I mean, you've got the lighting that illuminates the wine. You've got the overhead. You've got the LEDs. You've got the art. You've got the windows. You strategically placed lamps. Was the lighting element a challenge for you? Because restaurant lighting is a little bit different than residential lighting, right?
It is, but I know the client came to us with, he wanted this to feel like a home, which is why he wanted a residential designer and architect to work on this restaurant. So I concentrated on the decorative lighting. The lamps bring the light down to where your face is, and the picture lighting, lighting the art. So we tried to incorporate as many different levels of lighting. And by levels, I mean how far above the finished floor the light was, so that it could mimic what it feels like when you're in your own dining room. So there's a warmth that comes with it. I mean, we've all been in restaurants where the light comes just from the ceiling, and if you're unfortunate, it will hit you directly on the top of your head and make you look like a ghoul while you're eating dinner. So I think that it's vanity lighting. I think when you go to dinner for a special occasion, you want to look good. So I think it's important to bring some light in from the side and have it be filtered.
One other thing that Erika, one second, please. The only other thing that I just wanted to comment on that before I lose track of this is something that I noticed the moment I looked at it with regard to the seating. This is not by any stretch, this is not a large space, but one of the things that you did, especially with the seating in the middle, as well as the paneling on the walls, is you've got this element that I don't know if it was intended or not, the sound baffling that you get from this. I mean, being in audio, I will tell you firsthand, sound is everything to me. And looking at this and how you've got the sound baffling off of all this upholstery, what was the thought process as you went into this?
Well, I can assure you the baffling of the sound was intentional. That's another pet peeve. As I get older, restaurants get very loud. At least I remember them being loud when I was in them. But it gets really loud and it kind of takes away from the enjoyment. This is, just like with the lighting, this was an opportunity and a great example of how you work with the architect and the interior design to accomplish one I don't even know what you could say, one quality. This was done by McAlpin, was the architect on this. David Baker was the project manager on this project. And I worked very closely with him on making sure that you can hear each other when you're sitting across the table, that the lighting was just right. This is a really fine example of what happens when you work really well with other people on the team.
I can totally see it. Sorry, Erika, go ahead.
No, the question was with regards to this image we're looking at, what is the paneling that you used on the walls?
It's horizontal planking and we painted it. It's not stained. So I'm going to go out on a limb because I don't know. That would have been something that David would have specified. But I will say that whatever it was, I know it wasn't really expensive.
I love that.
I mean, you've got to save some places so that you can splurge in others.
Yeah.
You got to buy the lights.
You got to get that art and those mirrors in there.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Okay, so is this one of the wine rooms, or were there multiple?
This was the main wine room.
Okay.
It was a private dining room as well.
I love that.
And there's not enough wine in there. There was more wine by the time we finished.
Isn't that always the case when designing?
Yeah, I thought there was more.
Must have been a hole in the bottle. Okay.
Yeah.
So I love that. I absolutely love that. With this, okay, so we are jumping over to the Kips Bay design house. Susan, what year was this?
Oh gosh, I don't remember.
2017.
17.
Thank you, Erika.
Okay. So talk about moody, talk about drama, talk about atmosphere. Oh my gosh. I love this. Okay, so the first question I have for you about design houses is, because you don't have to serve a specific individual or a specific client, you get a little more freedom, right? Where do you start?
Whenever you're doing a show house, you're in a situation where you get what you get. And you have to start with, how can I heal what is usually not the best architecture you've ever worked with? I hate to say it. People say, don't you love to do a show house? You can make all the decisions because you don't have to think about a client. And my answer is always, you have the most formidable client when you work on the show house, because you are kind of stuck with however this room came. There was nothing that you could really change. You could change it, but then you had to change it back. Usually they're properties that are for sale. Mm-hmm. So you have to put everything back the way you found it. This was a particularly unattractive space. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have got to bathe this in shadow. So I immediately said, I've got to go with a dark color, because that will make it feel rich. But a lot of people don't respond to a lot of depth and color. They need something light. So hopefully you'll notice that almost everything that I've used in this space is light. So instead of painting the walls white, I just had everything inside those walls take the lighter tone. It's a reversal. It's like I switched the negative and positive space.
Yeah, I totally get that. And then you worked with a little pop of color, here and there, to sort of finish it out. And it feels, it's so great. I absolutely love this. I love this. And then the artwork, I was going to ask you about the artwork.
Okay, so this artwork is a set of archaeological etchings that I think I found online. And it really appealed to me because I love culture, so I love archaeology. And I bought them for myself. And I was really happy that I had an opportunity to use them and share them with everyone before I, put my arm around them and kind of said, oh, this is just mine.
Quick question about accessories and smalls. I'm just curious, if you're in Texas, you say, oh, we're definitely going to Round Top. If you're in LA, you're going to the flea market at the Rose Bowl. If you're in Dallas, you're going to Canton, or outside of Canton and trade days. I'm just curious, do you have a spot? Do you have a place where you go domestically? Because internationally, that's a whole other story. But domestically, do you have a spot where you go to pick and find?
No, because my answer was that I spend a lot of time shopping in France, in Paris, and in the south of France, like a lot of us have. And that's when I would find some really great things. But domestically, because of technology, when I was in Europe shopping, I developed relationships with people that I trusted. And so I did a lot of shopping I did online. But for accessories really take an awful big time investment, because you have to look everywhere to find the special things. And you have to really go twice as deep to find things that not everyone else is using. So you have to be a treasure hunter. And,
oh, yeah.
and I wish there was one spot. I've been to all those places that you've talked about. So the only answer is yes, all of them.
And the follow-up to that, just quickly, do you store? Do you have them in your house, or do you try to clear things out as quickly as they come in?
I try not to store. I try, I don't want to forget about anything. And of course, yes, there's a lot in my house, but once it kind of comes in the house, it doesn't really want to leave. So if I see something, my eye, it's really about how your eye is tuned toward the projects that you're working on and the clients that you're working with. So you start to see things that remind you of those people that are your clients at that time. And hopefully you will buy something, share it, or find it and share it before you buy it with the client, and ideally it goes directly into somebody's project.
And I asked the question only because I've had this conversation so many times with people who have gone back and forth. Some will say, you know what, I've got 4 storage units, and I just meticulously itemized what I have and where it is. But you will always forget bolts of furniture or bolts of fabric. You'll always forget things.
I like to know the people that have those storage units. I mean, that's a no-brainer. I have a lot of friends, and I know a lot of dealers that have storage units, and I don't have to do that. They've already done it.
It's a good point. It's a great point.
So Susan, we did have one question in regards to this space, and that was if you knew the paint color that you used.
It was I don't right off the top of my head, but I know that it was a Ferro and ball color that I selected, and I only know the story behind it. Oh. I was looking for the color of ink in money, and this color ended up being one of their trending colors for that year that was that we both happened to pick independently. But it is, I don't know the color of it.
What we'll do is we'll try to follow up on that, and if we can find out what that color is, we'll put it in the show notes when we publish this. But I absolutely love this. Erika, for time, is it possible to jump to the lavish Tudor?
Yeah, it's open.
Oh, okay, this is it. So Susan, welcome home.
Thank you. It doesn't look like that right now.
So this is your home.
Yes.
What is the story behind it? When did you design it? When did you find it? And what was the process? And then the biggest question I have for you is, what kind of client are you? Like, are you a good client? Does your designer like working with you?
Well, when I was doing this, when I was working on this house, I had one of my really best friends. It became apparent that I needed a project manager when I was working on this house. And I was fortunate enough to work with somebody that loved me and knew me. And she worked on making sure that things kind of happened. And after we were done with it, she looked at me and she said, I thought I knew you really well, but I did not realize how uncompromising you were. And I took it as a compliment. I do believe that in design, you have to have a thesis statement. You have your story. You have the thing that you're trying to create, that feeling or that atmosphere you're trying to create. And I think it's really important that you stick to it. And those are the most successful interiors. The interiors that don't forget what your very first thought, visceral reaction was to the space. You want to be evocative. You want to bring about that feeling in the end. This was a house that was abandoned for 2 years. I believe that I bought this house. I was fortunate to find this house with my husband at a time when I think it was 2008, when the bottom fell out of everything. I think we got this house, I believe in 2010. It was a foreclosure property. The bank owned it. It had been abandoned. It was but there was no kitchen or bathrooms. We couldn't even get a regular home loan in order to buy it. And I thought, this is perfect. I can do exactly what I want. And I don't have to honor someone else's bad design decision or pay for it.
So that being said, gosh, that's an amazing story. What did you find? I mean, you have sort of two options, right? Either you found when you got down to the studs, was it down to the studs that you were pleasantly surprised, or did you find anything that you wish you hadn't had to deal with?
Well, I probably shouldn't say this because someday I might want to sell this house, but there were mushrooms growing inside the house. See, so I'm going to say it anyway. There were mushrooms growing on the ceiling in one of the rooms of this house because it had been neglected for so long. Now, not many people can say that they've had to flick mushrooms off their ceiling. We do not have that problem, but it is a 100-year-old house.
Yeah.
You know, and things need to be cared for. So this house, it really needed us.
Yeah.
It needed us. And I walked away from the deal at one point. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And then I went out and I looked at all these other houses. And then I looked at Adrian, my husband, and I started to cry. And I said, I want that house.
Well, but again, as we look at this, your desire for shadow clearly was present at the time you were thinking about this space, along with your whole idea of the abstract and the reversal. You employed that here as well.
Yeah, when I saw this, when I just heard what you said about, you know, when I saw this picture being next, and you just said what you said, it was this marble needed you. This fabrication and this design is really, really gorgeous, and it really allows this natural, beautiful material to shine. And I can tell you worked hand in glove with your fabricator to make this happen. This is not a mistake.
I did. Yeah, I was really, that was kind of a splurge for me. I thought, oh, I need this.
Yeah. And it's masculine and feminine, as we just had a chat mention that it's what is this space? Is it part of the kitchen or?
It's the butler's pantry.
It's gorgeous. Just gorgeous.
Thank
you. Gosh, I love this. I love this. Was your feeling as you went through this, did you have, because we've been talking about drama, we've been talking about feeling, we've been talking about sight, smell, sound, all the senses, right? Aside from the smell of mushrooms, did you know sort of what did you want? Did you know coming into this, or was that process with your project manager kind of like an evolution?
I think that I knew that I loved high contrast because I felt it was really dynamic. And I knew that I had to do a lot of healing of architecture because I'm really fortunate. I work with really good architects. And this house maybe didn't have the best architect when it was originally built. So I've learned how to use paint to create depth. And, you know, and I think what you'll see in a lot of the work that I do is I learn how to use drapery and paint architecturally to kind of cover up and make cover up architectural mistakes and put your best foot forward in a space that may need a little bit of help. Some spaces you can decorate your way out of. This house, I was able to decorate my way out of.
And I'm curious if this was something that that is innate, or if you had to learn this over time.
Decorating my way out of things. I can't remember when
architecturally speaking.
I think that I've worked with a lot of really talented people, and I think that I've learned a lot, but I think that I've read a lot. I've seen a lot. I've taken a lot of, you know, I get a lot of visual food. I think that you get better at what you do the longer you do it. So I am the recipient of a lot of really, really smart ideas from really smart people. And hopefully I've honored them by making it appear in the world as a real thing.
I love this, specifically because, you know, this is something that I haven't, like I mentioned before, I haven't really had the opportunity to do this. And the feedback that we've gotten is, you know, going through and doing these case studies and these deep dives onto all of this. It provides this education that you don't learn when you're learning to be a designer. You know, you learn a lot of history and you learn about color and you learn about materials. You learn about a lot of things that are important to the function of being a designer, right? But they're learning who you are as a designer. You don't learn that until you get out and you start doing it.
Right.
And this has been just so much fun. So this is the yard. Was the pool there already?
No, this is another home.
Oh, this is the next project.
Yep, sorry.
Okay, this is via Violetta?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, where is this?
Alice Beach, Florida.
Okay, and by the way, for the sake of time, because we've got 2 minutes and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Can you just sort of tell us about this project and where it came from, and especially, again, your philosophy as it relates to the design of this room, this space?
This is a project that, this was my very first plums and purples project that I'd ever done. And it was for a wonderful woman. Her name is Julie Keeter, and she was recently widowed, and it's a property that she thought that she would be sharing with her husband, and she decided she was going to go forward and develop this property in this house. And it was going to be a wonderful feminine place for, I think that it's where she and her girlfriends meet. So there's a real strength in its femininity. And it was a color palette she trusted. And it was a color palette that I didn't normally work in. And it was absolutely a wonderful experience. It was a wonderful experience. And it turned out to be all the colors that you see in the sky at the beach as the sun is setting. All those, you know, purples and corals and pinks. And it's an oceanfront property. And I know that she spends a lot of time in here. So it's well loved and well lived in.
I love that. Here's what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you. Just out of curiosity, Susan, how are you for time?
I'm fine.
You got a few extra minutes? Okay. Here's what I'd like to do. I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. It's 1 o'clock here on the West Coast. I want to thank everyone for joining us. What I'd like to do is I know we still have some questions that didn't get answered, and I think that maybe some folks have some additional questions as we continue to talk. I'd like to be able to answer everyone's questions if we could. So we'll keep this open, but here's what I'd like you all to know if you do have to go. Again, thank you so much, Susan. This was amazing. Erika, thank you. Thank you, Walker Zanger, for making this opportunity possible and working with us on the showroom. And thank you all for joining us today. And again, if you'd like to hear this again or see it, because maybe it's something that you missed, we will put it on the Convo by Design podcast feed, as well as the YouTube channel, so that you can watch it again. And again, thank you. With that, what I'd love to do is say, if those of you who have to go, it was great to see you. And we're going to keep going a little bit. Erika, are there some questions that we didn't get to?
No, we actually did get to all the questions, but there were some compliments that about the number one, your design vocabulary that came up a couple of times. I think everyone enjoyed your journey that you took us on through your gift of language. So thank you for that. And then I think that another sort of theme that came in some of the questions was just this play of masculine and feminine. So maybe we could talk about that just a touch.
Well, I believe that you should rise to every occasion. And if something is really strong in masculine language, I think that you have to be strong in your feminine language so that together they become much more powerful. And one doesn't dominate the other. They have to be two really strong, equal elements. You know, I love Italian design because there's some strong feminine principles in Italian design. You know, the curves and things like that. And everybody really likes a strong space. They feel safe. They feel safe in a strong space.
I think that's true. I also think that's more important now than ever before. It's incredibly accurate.
Yeah.
Poignant.
And there's a lot of comments about global and worldly, and I think for me, I'd just like to know, what's your favorite place to go in France?
I love Ile-sur-le-Sorgue. I mean, I have for years. I mean, one of the things that I miss from my isolation is shopping and exploring and hunting for treasures. And I always knew that whenever we went to the south of France, you know, you were just assaulted by the beauty of it. It was so wonderful. And even the way they, way they conduct themselves in their everyday life, was a grace to it. But I really, I always found something really good there. You always go back to the scene of the crime.
Yeah, exactly. No, I love that. And thank you, Susan, for staying a couple extra minutes, and everyone, thank you for sticking around. I kind of, to be honest with you, I kind of got lost in the journey a little bit. I lost time a little bit. I just so thoroughly enjoyed the tour.
Thank you. I did too.
Thank you, Susan.
And thank you for doing this. And again, thank you all for joining us. This was wonderful.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.